Hey, welcome to this week's edition of the Galilee podcast. Joey, your host here. I'm really glad you're taking the time to spend with us. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about our 150-year celebration that is coming this Sunday. We're going to talk a little bit about our plans. We're going to talk a little bit about our history as a church, and then we're also going to talk about our future. So make sure that you're here and stay tuned. Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to this week's edition of the Galilee podcast. Episode 20 is finally here, and today I am joined by our entire ministerial staff, how do you say that? Everybody.
For you to say.
Yeah.
Can you spell it?
No.
Didn't think so.
So all of us are here because this week is something very special for us as a church. We're celebrating 150 years. And we are actually here right now in the oldest building on our campus. This is our multi-purpose chapel where a lot of our youth activities happen. It's pretty much Brian's neck of the woods, so he gets the honor of using this space a lot. So we're here today. We're going to talk about a little bit about Sunday, which is our 150th celebration. We're going to do that at the end. But today what I really want to do is talk about just kind of talk about what does it mean for us to be able to serve in a church that's been around for 150 years, because the reality is a lot of churches don't get to celebrate such a year. And also I think it would be a great opportunity for us to maybe even encourage some guys who are out there maybe struggling right now with longevity. Maybe they're in a situation. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys, we're ready. As you can see, they're in the bright light. They feel like they're in a lineup. So it's going to be awesome. So, Galilee Christian Church comes into existence 1870, right, around that way. So that's like 4 or 5 years, or 5 or 6 years after the end of the Civil War. A guy named Philip Lamar enters into this area known as Galilee, and if I'm right, Jefferson was a city nearby. I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so he comes in, he starts a church, Galilee Christian Church, him and his brother, and here we are, 150 years later. Some really great stories, some great leaders have come into this church and come out of this church, and so it's a great honor to serve here for all of us. So, real quickly, I want to start here, which is, what does it kind of mean to you to serve a church that's 150, right? I mean, again, a lot of churches don't get that opportunity. They don't get to make it that long. We are honored to do that, and we are in a legacy of leaders here. So, what does that mean to you guys? I want to start with Brian, because you've been here the longest. You're the old man on the campus. So, figuratively and almost literally. So, so what is that like for you?
I've always enjoyed hearing the legacy of the story, like how Galilee was this small community, and there was like a one-room schoolhouse, and like right on the river. They're still kind of there, dilapidated. It's an old cotton gin, and there was something, maybe a country store, and the only thing that still stands is the church. Yeah. And thriving, growing, like never. Just for all those years, it's the one thing that lasted. Yeah, and I think that's cool, to kind of look back at that and see that, hey, we're still up on the hill, we're still going, we're still rocking, we're still rolling. So.
Nick, how about for you, man?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, there's a weight of the legacy of 150 years that I think we probably all feel, over this amount of time, and you think of the weight of the legacy and the weight of the responsibility of that legacy. Because while, I'm first of all beholden to the Lord and to His church, capital C, you definitely feel the weight of that responsibility through the years, all the people that have invested time, energy, effort, money into this place. And, you want to do that well, certainly to honor Jesus first, but to honor them too, to say, hey, we want to be a part of the next 150 years going forward. And to do that, it means, quite honestly, we have to be effective with what the Lord has given us. It's like that, the parable of the sower, and thinking about your responsibility in that, and what are you going to do with what's been given to you, and are you going to return an investment on what's been placed in your hands.
Yeah. Are you going to move the ball down the field?
Right.
How well are you going to
Or is Jesus going to find me, like, hey, oh, well, I've at least got what you, originally gave me.
Right.
I'd like to hand it back to him better than I found it.
Right. Colin, how about you, man?
Yeah, for me, ironically, it'll be a year in November since I came to Galilee.
Yeah.
And so, I think of how fortunate, how I feel being able to come into a church that's had such a rich history. And I think about, the foundation and knowing Jesus has been that foundation as people have come and gone, and that will continue to happen. But being able to celebrate that Jesus has been the foundation of this church. And if we continue doing that and leading with courage, that will continue to be the foundation.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Awesome.
Ray?
I think I've been here a month longer than you, maybe.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed seeing that the people aren't just in love with the people who have been here a while or have a lot of family who have been here a while.
Yeah.
They're in love with the legacy of reaching people for Christ.
Yeah.
When I talk to them, and that's really struck me as something that's special to this church, because you do not always see that in churches that have been around so long. So it's been good to see.
Yeah, growing up in the area, not in this area, but in the Atlanta area, and going to being in churches similar to Galilee and going to Atlanta Christian College and stuff. Galilee was always one of those churches that was like special among churches. And I remember being in Bible college and it being like one of the places you wanted to go. Like one of the places that we would talk about, like, when someone got an internship, you were like, oh my gosh, you guys go to Galilee? That's so cool. So for me, it's always been one of those places. I think Tom and his legacy too have been one of those that this was one of those places where it was respected and has been respected and has continued to be respected to this day. And that's again part of that weight that I know all of us feel is we want to make sure that we are still that place that is honoring and people respect. As you think about 150 years and you think about, Colin touched on it a little bit when he talked about keeping Jesus the center rock. What is it about Galilee that you think God was able to use to keep it for 150 years? What's some of those things that you're like, man, I would point to this as being one of those key things that's kept Galilee here, that kept us, obviously the school and stuff, but, what do you think?
We talked about Jesus, but it's the people who love Jesus, right? It's the families, it's the fellowship, it's those the relationships that I think are the glue that many times, obviously Jesus is the foundation, right? He's the cornerstone. It's the relationships, and I think that it's a really, really strong glue.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things to me about Galilee is that like you walk around and you see, oh, there's someone whose family has literally been here since the beginning, and that's really cool. How about anybody else? Nick, what would you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil my message
on
Sunday, but I'm literally talking about this. But to me, the key word that I see across generations is courage, and it's courage for Christ. People that were brave enough, bold enough, cared enough to make much of Jesus in this place are why there is a legacy in this place. For me.
Yeah. You guys, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can say for our kids ministry, we have so many families that I met when I first got here, and the thing that stuck out to me was how long they've continued to serve, how long they've attended. I can think of probably 2 or 3 families that have served in kids for 10 years, and that just blew me away in the best way. And so I would agree with Brian that really it's the families that have been a huge part of what's made Galilee, and what's going to continue that in the future.
Yeah, surviving kids ministry for 10 years. We need to give them a plaque.
Yes, 100%.
So of course we cannot talk about the history of Galilee and not talk about Mr. Tom. He has been a faithful leader at this church for many years. I don't think I've known anyone else that has stayed at their first church as long as he has. This is first for him.
Yeah.
He tells the story of this is his first church. He served and he stayed for 50 years. And then you think about a guy like that, he retired several years ago when Nick came, and then just, Charles Stanley just took a step down.
He was 50-some years too, but not in the same church.
Right, yeah.
You know, he
had
had
been there
before that.
Yeah, so, I mean, what do you think, I mean, I especially want to hear from you, because you served with him before any of them. I mean, what's it like serving with Tom? Just give us kind of a snippet. I mean,
it was great. I mean, that was, what I love most is he, you know, I was a lot younger when I came here then, like early 30s.
Yeah.
And he didn't just want my ministry to thrive, he wanted me and my family personally. Like, he set me down, I remember one of the first weeks I was here, he says, what are you doing for your retirement? You know, at that point I wasn't, you know, yelling at the family, I'm just trying to make it, you know?
Yeah,
and he's like, here's what I want you to do, I want you to think about putting some money, he cared about more than just that the church would thrive, that I would thrive. And, you know, when somebody takes that initiative to say, I want you to thrive, not just this church, like that just makes you think, well, that person cares about me. I'll do whatever I can to help, you know, whatever he asked me to do, you know. So that was huge for me.
Nick, how about you? I mean, you've spent a lot of time with him too. Especially, I'm fascinated. What was those first conversations like, right? Because I mean, you as a young guy coming in, going, okay, well, I'm supposed to take up with this guy this 50 years. What were some of those first conversations like between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first conversation of any substance that we really had happened in a restaurant when my wife and I were here for an interview. We came down multiple times. The church had a very well thought out plan of how they were going to approach this transition of leadership, and part of that was, you know, me getting to know them getting to know us, et cetera, et cetera. So we came down and we had a long meeting with elders and with him. Tom was in that meeting as well, and we went to O'Charley's, I think it was O'Charley's in Winder, and I'll never forget, it was just me, and it was probably like 9:30 by the time we got out of this meeting.
Yeah.
And Abby and I were driving back that night to Greensboro because we'd already been away from our kids for a weekend, you know, to come down. So we were trying to get back, and so we were going to drive back late. So then we go out to dinner with Tom at 9:30, so you know, we're not done with that until like 11 something, right? But it was so good because that was where, honestly, we were on the fence up until the time we had that dinner.
Yeah.
And sitting down with him and hearing his heart for the church, and as Brian said, his heart for us. You know, he said in that meeting, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. And to this day, he has kept his word on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, he'd be the first to tell you he didn't love every decision that I've made or you've made in that time. Who would, right?
Right.
And at the same time, he's been one who's been very vocal in his support, his encouragement, his love. And it came down to that night at O'Charley's, sitting there having dinner and getting to know him as a man and seeing his love for the church and for us.
You know, and I mean, you guys, I mean, have you guys had a lot of interaction with Tom?
Had a little interaction.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some impressions that you've gotten from it.
Yeah, I think somebody that just has had a legacy of loving people. I remember, maybe it was you that told me, you know, people that have lived in Jefferson for so long, when Tom first started, he did everybody's wedding.
Yeah.
He just was the go-to person. And so it inspires me, starting out in ministry just within the first few years, to keep going in the midst of division and challenges and knowing it's all about what your foundation is. I know we keep using that word, but I feel like, you know, this is a great season to remember, you know, what we put in is what we're going to get out.
Yeah.
And so I see that Tom has really worked that well.
Yeah. Ray, I mean, any interaction?
I've had a little bit of interaction. I've enjoyed, he's talked to me several times about worship. You know, some preachers just want to preach and they don't understand kind of what goes into the worship. He really loves worship and he loves music and he really truly wants people to worship God.
Yeah.
And just seeing his heart for that has been really great.
Cool. For me, one of the things that's interesting, that I think is great about Tom, and especially in a modern world where you see a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, celebrity ministers and pastors out there, honestly having some really moral failures, you know, unfortunately, or having issues. And yet Tom was able to serve 50 years with integrity that can't be challenged. I mean, you know,
100%.
Granted, it's a little bit of a different time, but still, I mean, he led with such integrity and honesty, and I think that's an honor to be able to remember about him and serve with him, especially in a world where, unfortunately, it doesn't always happen for church leaders. And like you said, I mean, like you were talking about, it's really hard to find somebody in Jefferson who doesn't know Tom Blake, and they don't have a kind word to say about him. And that's another thing, too. I mean, we're not always the nicest people all the time, right? I mean, and yet, to have that kind of legacy is really cool for people to say, yeah, man, he's always a very kind person. And so one of the things that's interesting to me that I want us to talk a little bit about is, I want to talk a little bit maybe to some of our leaders out there who may be watching this, celebrating with us. You've got Tom, who's able to stay for 50 years. And all of us here pretty much have been in church long enough now, or especially us guys, we've been in ministry long enough now to know that there are Mondays that you want to quit, right? There are Sundays that you want just to be over. And then there are some days where you're just like, man, this is so awesome. And it can be a real ebb and flow, right? So what are some things you guys think maybe was key for Tom, or maybe is key now, to be able to have that kind of longevity serving somewhere in ministry? It doesn't have to be profound, but what is just something you guys think, man, I think this is something I would say.
I think a big thing for me over the last several years has been having a safe place to talk about the challenges in ministry.
Yeah.
I know I have two guys I talk to every week that live out in Arizona, and those are two guys who are also in full-time ministry, but it's one place to just express, here are some challenges I'm working through. Mm-hmm. And, at the same time, being able to have that safe place here on staff as we truly walk through this thing called ministry together. Mm-hmm. So I think for any leader of ministry, a key is being able to have relationships with your boss, with other staff. And that will create unity and you can move forward together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right?
I read something the other day just about Jesus and how Jesus had this way of living in between. It's easy to be black or white in this world today. And I was thinking about that in light of being a minister of the gospel. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, like you said, days where you want to quit, and days where it's like, this is so awesome. This week's been one of those weeks for me where it's kind of been both every day. And I have to say, that message to me really hit me. Like, I have to live in between, and I believe that Tom did that. He knew how to have the joy even when it wasn't easy. There's a joy in knowing that it's not easy because you're doing something well and you're doing something for Christ. If it's harder, it's going to many times be what we're supposed to be doing. So
it's meaningful, impactful work. How about you guys?
Just to ride around with Tom a lot. So.
That's the key, ride around with Tom.
Yeah, ride around a lot. And I remember one time he told me he learned young, in ministry. He said, you got to let yourself off the hook. Mm-hmm. There's so many times you preach and no one, makes a decision, or, you've really reached out and worked with someone and then they've kind of fallen back into what they, what the struggle that we all have, whatever that may be. And he's like, so often he would feel like, well, that's on him. And he's like, it's not on me. And if you'll learn to do that, let yourself off the hook a little bit, like it's a healthy thing.
That's cool. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I would just say, never resign on a Monday. That's the first thing first.
Number one.
Yeah, and then the second piece is that you define your why. Mm-hmm. If you have a clear sense of why you're doing what you're doing, then it isn't predicated on the applause of men, and you don't find yourself, the humanity in you will find yourself caring about what people think no matter what you do, but you won't find yourself defined ultimately by it or finding that as your core source. That can't be your core source of motivation if you're going to last. It is so critical that we recognize that the gospel frees us from performance. The gospel frees us from having to please men. The gospel frees us from having to take our sense of worth from what other people think of us and allows us to define ourselves by Christ. and who He is in us.
Yeah.
And if we, the sooner, if I could go back and hand my 21-year-old self something,
Yeah.
it would be that in a box, gift wrapped of like, open, break open when, in
Yeah.
case of emergency, because
Yeah.
you're going to need this,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And that's what I do.
All right, let's shift our focus a little bit from past to future, okay, from history to what's coming. Obviously, over the course of 150 years, it's pretty safe to say that things are different than they were in 1870, right? And they're going to be different moving forward. And the reality is that I think you cannot talk about longevity, you cannot talk about continuing to be impactful in a community and not talk about the dirty word of change, right? I mean, it's just the reality that life happens, things happen, they force us. And I imagine there were moments where Tom made decisions. They were changing decisions, at the time, and he was like, "We're gonna put a projector in this room." That was the big thing. Or we're gonna remove these pews and put in chairs or something. I don't know, but that it's bound to happen, right? And one of my experiences in life that I think most people generally don't like change. They may be okay with some change, but there's going to be something. If we find it, they're going to hate it.
Yeah.
But I also think that people have a tolerance for it. Some people have a bit more tolerance maybe than someone else. Obviously, as we think about the future, as we think about impacting and continuing, the reality is that it's not 1870 anymore, right? We're not going to do it that way, the way they did in 1870. We've got to adapt. We've got to find ways to connect and register and continue to be faithful. This is something as leaders we wrestle with always, because we're trying to make sure that our church is impactful. At the same time, we're trying to also be respectful and understanding that people are going to get nervous about that. So, as we think about us as the future, because this is one of the things we talked about in our staff meeting today, was being adaptable, and the importance of that. Anticipating, right? What is something that you would say is key for us as leaders, but also as members of a church to remember moving forward, especially when that word change is going to come?
Yeah, I'll go first on this one because I think that's a great question, and at the heart of it is this: that not everything that got us here will get us there. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly, there are some things that are universal. Proclaiming the gospel, preaching the Bible, loving people. These are universal things that will always be a part of the church until He comes back to get us. But everything that got us here is not going to get us there. That is both figurative and literally true. Yeah. Many of us had the joy of meeting Miss Mary Morgan, who passed away a few years ago, and she lived to be 99 years old. And she grew up on her father's farm that was about a mile from here. Yeah. And she and her family literally rode to our church in a horse-drawn wagon. Mm-hmm. So she got to see Galilee when it was just a little old wooden building with a door for the men and a door for the women to enter into separately. That was what she got to see. Yeah. But then she also got to see it change unbelievably significantly, from building after building after building to outreach to young people to changing ministry models, to music, even some music style stuff, that she was a part of all of that. Yeah. And all of those things were necessary changes to reach the people that were in front of them as ministers and as leaders in the church in that day. Yeah. And that if they had been doing things in the horse-drawn wagon style, right, that's not a plan. She wouldn't have called it a plan in 1960, much less in 2020.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like for a church to have the longevity and continue to have the impact, it's got to face every new generation, a new thing, new challenge, and it's got to answer it. I mean, the reality is that I think sometimes we forget, because one of the things I heard very early on is that most people are comfortable with the church where they enter it, right? So the time they enter it, if that's 150 people, that's where they're most comfortable, right? If it's 1970, that's where they're most comfortable. Because that's what they remember, that's what they know. But because of that, we tend to forget that it isn't 1870. The church has changed. It has to change. It changed long before you got there, right? So it's a natural part of the life cycle of the church. And so I think it's important for us to remember, like you said, there are things that are not going to change. The scriptures don't change. Jesus doesn't change. Our preaching the gospel doesn't change. Our loving people, that stuff doesn't change. Some other things may change, but at the end of the day, the things that matter never change, right? How about you guys? Ray, what do you think? What's, I mean, I know it's probably a big question, but I mean...
Change.
You don't have to deal with any of that.
No, not at all. You know, where we are as a church, obviously, is that we're trying to embrace the past and what we've had, but also think about the future and move towards that. And actually, I think that the plan we're on right now is really great because we're helping people, I think, I've noticed online, I don't know if you noticed it this week, but a lot of people that actually go to the first service and watch the first service also watch the second service and complimented on it. So I think people are interested as long as they get something that helps them to worship personally. They're also interested in our church. This is why we're a great church, is because they are interested in seeing those who don't know the Lord that are younger also be able to enter in. So.
And they can control the volume on it.
Sorry. I'll talk to Tony.
Oh, Jim! I couldn't resist that.
No.
I was just waiting over here with the punchline.
And that's the hard, like, we want to be a church for everyone.
Right.
And that's really, really, really difficult.
Lofty goal.
I mean, it'd be a lot easier if we would say, we're just going to be a church for this, but we've stepped into something much more challenging, which I think is cool, is to say, hey, we don't care your age, your demographic, whatever, how much money, like whatever it is, it's different. We want to try to meet those needs of everyone. It's up.
Yeah, when I first came to Galilee, I think the thing that I loved the most is it felt like a family church, right? So it felt like something that grandma, grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, and kids, they could all come together because there was something for all of them, right? And it was one of those, and that's, I think that's really cool. I think that's a cool thing. While we still try to be that, because that to me is the fun country aspect of church, is that when the whole family can go there, when grandma and grandpa do it. But yet we can still do it in modern ways. What do you guys think? And then I want to get to Sunday morning, and then we'll wrap up. We may have already touched on some of this, but what do you think is vital for us going forward? You really feel like this is a vital thing, and that's a big question probably too. It's probably like, we're figuring it out, we'll let you know. But,
I'll say for Galilee Kids, for our kids ministry, helping kids understand that they are not only an important part of the church today, but they are the future of the church. And so on Sunday, I look at our 5th graders and really helping them see you are the future of this church. And for a kindergartner, thinking, okay, they're going to enjoy seeing some pictures and thinking, wow, Galilee used to be a farmland. That's fun. But really, over the years to come, helping kids see and believe you not only get to come to church on Sundays, but you get to play a vital role in the future of this church and how God leads it. So that, I think, is one thing I want to challenge our leaders to really believe, and not only believe, but put into action. And knowing, I had a mentor tell me once, your mission never changes, but the methods of ministry can change. And so, as you talked about earlier, knowing your why, and knowing as we make changes, and even if it's, changes that maybe a lot of people know, that you always are able to come back to your why. And for me, why I love to do kids ministry is because I remember when I first understood I get to be a part of where my church goes in the future. I am a part of this church, not just the person in the seat.
It's a crazy thought, right? Right now, potentially, in your ministry are the future elders of this church. Right? So the future spiritual leaders responsible to lead this church moving forward potentially are sitting right now as kindergartners or first graders or even 6th graders, 7th graders, right?
One of our elders now was a teenager in this church.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. So, I mean, that's part of the legacy of our church, and that's also the part of the future.
Yeah.
And making sure that we are, like, you know, it kind of goes back to that change thing. Like, we understand the importance of what we're doing, because we have to make sure that, you know, those future leaders of our church, they are potentially in our building right now, you know, showing up week in and week out. And so we want to make sure that we are doing and being men who set the example that those future leaders can look to. What is something else you guys think is vital for maybe moving forward? Brian, you've been here the longest, good sir.
Yeah.
How do you keep going ahead and well, here's a real question. Let's put him on the spot. How much longer do you think?
Let's get it on record here.
Well, I'm hoping
Lifetime contract.
I'm hoping to be sitting here when we film the 200
200?
podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be right here.
So we're
94 years old. Oldest youth ministry in existence.
You guys can roll my coffin in here for that.
I just think it's, like we just talked about, we have to focus on who we've got, and we also have to focus on who we don't. Like, we focus on the saints, the believers, and we also have to focus on the lost.
Yeah.
You know, how do we don't want the church to look the same. We want the people to walk in and be like, I don't know them.
Right.
Because there's new people that have come in that have come to meet Jesus. Like, it's great when we come in and walk in and do know everyone. That's an amazing feeling. We need a place to belong, but we also, there's a lot of other people that need to belong here as well, not just us.
Yeah, to me, it's about faithfulness. You know, if we'll just be faithful. You know, the faithfulness that we talked about before, that is a part of the legacy faithfulness, the legacy of faithfulness. But for us, just thinking about, you know what, we don't have all the answers. We can't anticipate everything that is coming down the pipe. But what we can do is know that in every moment, in every decision, in every piece of leadership, and managing our various aspects of ministry at Galilee, when the Lord finds us, you will find us faithful. If we do that, we'll be fine.
All right, let's turn our attentions to Sunday. So Sunday is our 150th celebration. We've been preparing for it and trying to do it in a socially distanced manner. So, you know, no big deal. We got it. It's an old habit for us.
Okay.
So homecoming 150 is Sunday. Let's just talk real briefly about the day and some important aspects of the day. So we will have our service at 11.
And only at 11.
Only at 11, yes. Only at 11. Afterwards, we've got literally lunch on the grounds. We have a large tent coming. If you haven't already RSVP'd for that, you can do so at Galilee.org. I believe, I could be lying, but that's,
you can.
You can. Okay, so
And it's up in our front sports field.
It's going to be up in the very front floor.
You won't be able to miss it.
You won't miss this tent. It's up in
You'll
the
see
tent.
it.
It'll be a circus, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It'll be a circus. We're going to do everything we can to not make it a circus. Yeah. So we've got all that set up. We're going to have dinner on the grounds. We're asking people to RSVPs just so that we can do things in a respectful way, in a social distance way. We also have overflow in our FLC. We are asking that if you're younger or if you're not maybe in the immune compromised group, that to please go ahead and head over here to make room in our worship center for maybe some of our older seniors or those who are a bit more medically fragile. We want to make sure that they have a place in the service. So we're going to have overflow. We're going to actually have the service live on the screen over there so that you can watch it. Brian is going to be heading that side up for us as he did. So we want to make sure that you know that, and again, if you're interested to do that. So real quickly, what I'd love to do is just kind of give what's going on, what's happening. So Ray, why don't we kick off with you? Can you give us what is worship going to be like? What do you guys got planned?
Really excited about worship.
Yeah.
We're going to have, so musically, we're going to have brass and organ. We're going to have piano. We're also going to have the band. We're going to do a couple songs of traditional songs, really big, and it's just going to be nice timpani. Really excited about that. We're also going to have the band play for us. And I'm just excited about having all the different instrumentalists and styles together in one service. And Tom Plank's going to be there. And
special performance.
Yeah.
Special performance.
It's going to be very cool.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Nick, how about you, man? What are some things you excite you about the service? Maybe you want to share? I mean,
Man.
I know you got your message, so we'll let you save that.
I promise I won't preach the message. I just think the opportunity to share on that day is a real honor for me, and I take it, obviously I just take it super seriously, but really glad that we'll get to celebrate together as a church. Really honored that I get to be the person who's preaching on that 150th anniversary. What an honor, because what a legacy of faith here. Excited for all of our people to be together. There's some intermingling that will happen that day that doesn't usually happen because we're in 2 services. And though we'll have some people on different sides of the campus, the thing that brings us all together is food.
Yeah.
So at the end, we'll all get to come and eat together. And is it a challenge that we're dealing with the social distancing aspect? Sure it is. But it's going to be an amazing day, a great day, and I just can't wait to be together with everyone.
Cool.
So I'm pumped.
Cool. Colin, how about for kids? I know teens are going to be with us, correct?
Correct.
Right, so kids. Tell us about kids, man.
So we'll have regular kids programming at 10 and 11. Kids will look pretty similar to a normal weekend, except we'll do a quick history lesson. We've got some pictures of what Galilee looked like way back when, and so we'll have some fun with that.
Cool. All right. Yeah. I mean, it's great.
It's great to get to share in that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I was thinking about this before we came on here. Our faith is one that's a historical faith. It's a generation that's passed down. And so to be able to pass that down to them is really cool. We've got a couple of, some of our Connect groups are meeting Sunday morning, so if you are in one and you're not sure, make sure you reach out to your Connect group leader to make sure. We also have some Connect groups that are serving, doing food and some other things, so please make sure that, again, you check with your Connect group leader to find out if you guys are meeting or if you're serving, if they could use your help. The other big thing on Sunday is our historical room. So we've had a committee coming together of people in our church who've been working diligently and hard to put together a room with some really cool things that they found, historical things, pictures. The old church doors from this building that we're sitting in are hung on the wall. So that is going to be open around 9:30. And so we want to invite you to come a little early and take a moment to walk through that room. Maybe even it may be a good idea to take it before lunch, let the line die down. But please take a moment to walk through that. That is actually going to be in our worship center and what used to be the library. So if you come in through our main doors and make a left, you can't miss it. It's right there. They've been working really hard on getting that room ready. And so we really want to make sure that a lot of people get through there and see some of the history of our church, the pictures, and some other great things. All right?
Yeah, it's really phenomenal.
Yeah.
They've done a great job.
Shout out to the people who are doing the work, man.
Robin Carr Smith has led that, and she has led it. I mean, there's other people on the committee that have done a great job, but she has really poured in a lot of effort to bring all that together, so we're proud of her.
Cool. Yeah, man. And so to wrap up, though, I'm gonna ask Nick to pray for us, man. I want us as a staff and as those who are watching, we're gonna pray for Sunday. We're gonna pray, thank the Lord for our history, asking for His continued guidance in our future. But I'm gonna have Nick kind of lead us right now as our leader and pastor and our minister.
Yeah, let's join together. Wow, Lord, 150 years. I mean, it's just unbelievable to think, and such a joy to come together even during this podcast and have this conversation that lets us really reflect. It is a weight, God, that we carry, a weight of responsibility, and Lord, we feel that. But I think that's okay, God. I think you allow us to feel that weight so that we recognize and that we carry it carefully. That we carry it with great responsibility and respect and love. Lord, I pray that you will find us faithful in every way that we are called to lead. But Lord, not just us as ministry staff, Lord, but as each and every minister here at Galilee, and we all are, as a priesthood of all believers, God. So that means that every person who calls Galilee home is a minister. They have a responsibility Lord, for the gospel. They have a responsibility for the church. And Lord, I pray that as we all share in that, Lord, that we all take our responsibility seriously, Lord, that we take our place in the history of Galilee seriously, God, that we do our part to carry that responsibility and that weight that brings ultimate glory to you, not to us, but to you. Father, I pray that you will bless each of these men and all the women and everyone that is involved in our church. Lord, I pray that you will have your hand on us as you have had for generations and generations before. God, I pray that you'll give us everything that we need to do the work you call us to do. We believe that if you've called us to it, God, that you will empower us to do it. Father, I pray your blessings upon our families. Lord, I pray your blessings upon this Sunday. Let things go well. Let them honor you. God, let it just be a great and energizing day as we look back and then we look forward. Because, Lord, for as long as you give us on this earth, we expect that, Lord willing, we'll have many more years to do your work and your will on this earth, to proclaim the gospel during this age of grace and see many, many people come to you. Let us take that seriously, and God, help us do our part. We love you, Jesus, and we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next week on another edition of the Galilee podcast.
See ya.